It happens quite organically, and I think because we've worked together for about 10 years, there are certain strengths that I feel like I have that Rachel has different strengths, and they kind of come together.
There a lot of research, like when we get brought onto a project early on, we're both reading the script, we're connecting with the filmmakers, but I'm doing a lot of deep dive research, learn a lot about like specific genres. It's really helpful because Deva also has an incredible breadth of knowledge already. It's great. Like we get to collaborate in a lot of ways.
Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week, I'm joined by music supervisors Deva Anderson and Rachel Lautzenheiser, whose work includes Masters of Air for Apple TV Plus, and more recently, The Piano Lesson for Netflix. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gordon. We're really glad to be here.
Thank you.
You guys have worked together on a couple of projects. I'm wondering how you guys like to divvy up the work. Like, what's that working relationship like?
Yeah, that's a common question too. It happens quite organically, and I think because we've worked together for about 10 years, and there are certain strengths that I feel like I have that Rachel has different strengths, and they kind of come together. So oftentimes in the very beginning, it happens with just a creative brainstorm, which is the most fun, of course, part of music supervision and discussion and really letting it free flow. And then, do you want to talk about how we kind of how it unfolds or how like the rest of the projects go?
I mean, I think more specifically to your question, like there a lot of research, like when we get brought onto a project early on, like, we're both reading the script, we're, connecting with the filmmakers, but I'm doing a lot of like deep dive research, and it's kind of like getting to do a lot of book reports and just learn a lot about like specific genres, which we love. And it's really helpful because like Deva also has an incredible breadth of knowledge already. So it's great. Like we get to collaborate in a lot of ways, whether it's like something that's a historical piece or something that is more like modern music, more contemporary music. Yeah, we get to bring both of that to the table.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts of what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.
How much, because you talked about deep research, and one of the things I love in music is sort of discovering a band that people haven't really heard of. But you're sort of in this situation when you're working on bigger productions and what have you, where they might want, a famous piece or anything like that. Like, how much are you allowed to sort of discover someone and bring them in versus how much you have to like, okay, we got to play this famous song here.
Yeah, that's actually a great question because we always say I mean, everyone has individual music tastes. You probably have very different music tastes than I do, than Rachel does, and there's so much out there now, and there's so much available, which we love compared to times past. But we're here to really service the filmmaker's vision. So even though we may love something, it really takes a while to get into the rhythm of the filmmakers of what they're envisioning, how they express it to us. And sometimes people talk about music in emotional ways that aren't specific.
Mhm.
So it takes us a while to get into the rhythm. And there's always an opportunity most of the time because filmmaking is such a collaborative process that we introduce new artists all the times. Or, Rachel's really great at finding, like, if it's a historical piece, then finding like some real hidden gems and bringing those to life. Those are some of our favorites. But
Mhm.
it always is, we always say sometimes there's something that we think is so perfect for the scene and it's unreleased, it's coming out next year, it's going to be someone so big. And if it doesn't work for the filmmakers, we have to just let it go. And that's always kind of the dance in creative filmmaking and matching music to make it work.
Totally.
You guys should create a Spotify playlist for music. These are the stuff we found that you guys haven't heard yet.
Yeah.
But like we talked about going deep into research, like
Mhm.
is that searching out like things like old records that might not people might like how do you discover this stuff? Because you're
Well,
looking for something that's not popular. Or
it's really interesting because it's both, obviously. I mean, we there's a tremendous amount of research that you can find online. But for example, when we worked on Penny Dreadful City of Angels, which
Mhm.
was a John Logan um show,
Miniseries.
yeah, it was a miniseries that was through Showtime, and it was a certain time period of Latin music in Los Angeles
Mhm.
in the 40s, and it was kind of around the Zoot suit era, but it was a little post, and we went. It was so much fun. It was
I
so
mean,
much
I
fun.
literally remember going to the Pasadena City Library and there being like, oh, these books you can't even check out. And so I would like take screenshots and read those. You know what I mean? And we had an on-camera band for that in that series. And so it was like, okay, what would have the music been like? Who would have been the performers? What type of instrumentation? And then we did an original song for that. And so because there was so little that was like accessible, we were able to like find one album that we kind of really had to like, it had all this cross-pollination of like different types of Latin music. And there was like one album that was kind of like, this is the vibe we're going for. And so, um, yeah, I mean, a complete book report, but it was so much fun.
what
Yeah.
so sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say to key off of what Rachel said, something like that really, really paid off. I mean, just in terms of it was so creatively satisfying. And
Mm.
we had, we were working closely with the choreographer and the showrunner, and it created kind of this magical tapestry of that time period of
Totally.
Latin music in LA.
Well, I was gonna ask because you mentioned Rachel that about the like doing live like you took that song that you found and then did it live for the show. And in, the piano lesson you have live performance and in Master of Air you have live performance. So how much are you involved with the live performances and like do you work with the bands to get them to sound a particular way? Like what's your process with that?
Yeah, okay, so I'll speak to the piano lesson. I was on set for that. Deva and I like were involved through a lot of different phases of like bringing that to life from early on. Our director was like, this is what I'm envisioning. And then we found out that the incredible Erica Badu was going to be the artist, the on-screen artist performance. And then he was like, yes, we're going to do an original song. So then, we started pulling all these different sources of inspiration, and it became really clear that Malcolm's vision was like leaning into the vein of an artist like a Bessie Smith, these old soul singers and blues singers. And so there were covers and there were multiple like pitches of like ideas of songs, but then also like the shaping of the song, the original song. I mean, again, it was a lot of people involved, but like Malcolm, he's so visionary and he knows what he wants. And so it's really easy to like make that vision come to life when you have a decisive person, I feel like. And so, yeah.
What you've also worked on like Greyhound, Band of Brothers, Pacific, and I'm wondering in terms of like like those types of projects like Master of Air, there's a lot of gravitas to the situation that they're in. So like, you know, do you feel a pressure to be respectful of the era? Like what's it like working on those?
We something like the Pacific or Band of Brothers. I mean, luckily, being here in-house at Playtone, as well as we do a lot of outside projects, outside music supervision and consulting. But the Playtone projects in particular, which is Greyhound, Band of Brothers, the Pacific, and Masters of the Air, there are so many uh, pieces of those musical pieces that we actually placed in there that we coordinated through the years of those projects being in development. So one of our key historical film producers or miniseries producers is right next door here at Playtone, in between Rachel and I. So we have the advantage of really talking about the source material at the very beginning stages. And so it was a huge advantage for those. And for those, we're very, very particular in terms of being historically accurate. For something like the piano lesson, as Rachel was saying, Malcolm really wanted to span and didn't want to make it time period specific. And so we had a lot of leeway in that.
So when it's like when you were doing the piano in terms of, because like you said, it's not time specific. What were the discussions around? Because obviously it wasn't time specific, but it was sort of stylistically specific. So like, how did you get that? What was that conversation like to make sure you were on the same page?
That's always evolutionary in any kind of filmmaking with music. I'll let you
Yeah,
talk about
I
that.
mean, from early on when we first jumped on the project, we were getting like lists and playlists of artists that him and key filmmakers were liking. And so we kind of realized early on that there was going to be more flexibility and creative liberty taken on this project. And so, yeah, then just having evolving discussions and then in post, like after everything during production to in post, continuing those conversations for those key spots where he wanted to place something that wasn't period specific. Yeah, there's a lot of pitching, but it's all about like honing in on what's in the pocket for like what that filmmaker is envisioning.
And it's always transforming.
Mhm.
Sometimes something musically, just like before it gets to post-production and editing. I mean, I know, Gordon, you interview a lot of really high esteem editors on your show. So you've heard a lot about the process of film editing and miniseries and show editing, where it evolves as it goes. Sometimes the film tells you what it is midway through. So months ago, a song that we think is so perfect, including our director may think this is it. When our director gets deeper into the editorial process and it takes a different shape and a life of its own, sometimes it introduces a new type of song or music or score that is very unexpected.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Now, you guys work on multiple projects at the same time, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you, especially with like research, how do you make sure you balanced your time so that you can discover the right music? Because there's so much music now to dig up.
Luckily, that's why we have two people here.
Yeah.
forehands that too. And that's why we really, really love the creative collaboration too. You know, the wonderful thing also, it's finding work-life balance is really, really important. And we do find when we actually budget our time correctly and not overstretch, we are, you know, I don't want to say we pride ourselves, but it's more just out of self-care too. We don't take on too many projects where we're stretched thin. We always say to filmmakers, which I do say is totally true, like we'll commit to something if they really have 100% of us, our time and our creativity. Otherwise, you know, we don't want to lend our services on just running like fumes. It's not fair to the film, it's not fair to the creatives. So, and within that, you have to, you know, I'm sure you know this too, Gordon, you know, films take different phases. So we are able to take multiple projects because sometimes something is shooting, and if there aren't on-camera needs, we'll be in post-production when it's really busy on something else. And so through the years, everything kind of balances out.
Yeah.
Is there a song that you've got and you're like, I really want to put this in a show or a movie, you just haven't found the right movie yet or show?
Well, it did happen with one song that we ended up placing, the Mary Lou.
Yeah. Yeah. We really wanted to place Mary Lou Williams originally in Masters of the Air. And it just didn't work out because from all the research we were doing, the album we had, the earliest album from like that we could find with recordings from her were from like 1944 and on potentially. And our like cutoff was like, or maybe it was, excuse me, 45. And our like cutoff date was like 43 or spring of 44. And so we just, again, being that we were really intentional about finding music that was true to the time period of like, you know, throughout the project, we were like, we can't let this live in Masters of the Air. And then lo and behold, the piano lesson comes along and Deva pitched Mary Lou Williams and that lived in the piano lesson. So it was really exciting for us to like find a home base for that.
And it was one of those songs, and she was a very like unknown. We love giving like shedding light to people that, you know, were unknown of the day. And, you know, she wrote with Duke Ellington and all of these people. She was hugely prolific, you know, piano player. And so it was really exciting when Malcolm really loved that song. And then we found out later, which was completely this kismet kind of spiritual thing, that there was something in relation to her and a painting that was done that inspired August Wilson and the piano lesson. So there was this full circle connection, which happened a lot with the piano lesson. It's really, really interesting. You know, that story and coming from the amazing August Wilson, you know, throughout the process of Malcolm's filmmaking and that. There were just a lot of really, you know, connective stories to that and how it unfolded that you can't explain, which, you know, is pretty amazing.
Was there a particular piece in the piano lessons that sort of was difficult to find something to fit, that you eventually found something that worked?
There is always that spot or two in films, you know, where it's like the last one where we've pitched, you know, hundreds of songs and it doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah. I mean, the end title credit, like the last cue that goes into the end title credit, we have Wither by Frank Ocean. And that was a song that was specifically very special to Malcolm. But there was also this, you know, I think with the end title credit, there can become this question of like, this is such a weighty spot. And so naturally, there's always like, we want to make sure we get it right. Did we get it right? Did we get it right? And it, you know, all through post, there will be a lot of, did we get it right? So that was a spot where, you know, I feel like there was a lot of like, we think we have it right, but there was also a lot of trying other potential source cues, like new artists that were dropping songs at the time of being like, let's just try it. Let's just try it. And then, of course, in final mix, it became very clear that like, no, this is the track.
Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I'll answer that first, and it's very timely in terms of the amazing Gene Hackman just passing away, but The Royal Tenenbaums is truly one of my favorite. And it's a big interconnected film with my sisters too. We just love his character of Royal Tenenbaum, Royal. And so anyway, may he rest in peace. That was one of my favorite films.
So good. I don't know if I would call it a guilty pleasure because it's just a pleasure in general. But for me, it would be Pride and Prejudice. That's probably my most watched film. If I'm having a horrible day, my reset button is like get a cup of tea, snuggle up on the couch and put in P&P. That is an all-time favorite.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Thank you. Wait, Gordon, we want to ask you what your guilty pleasure film
Oh,
is.
it's tricky because it constantly changes.
It does.
That's for me. So like for me it could be like I tend to go on like the really guilty stuff. So my wife and I watch a lot of reality shows just to decompress,
Yeah.
right? And so we do what is it? Love is Blind she really likes.
Okay.
What is the other one? I can't remember the name of the other one. I'm the worst with the names of them. But yeah, so right now we're on sort of like a reality kick because
That's great.
So fun. That's great.
That's a good one because our other reality is a little wacky right now.
yeah, exactly. That's literally why we're like, you know what, we're gonna tap into
all the comedy we can get these days.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview.
You. Thank
And that-
you.
that's
We're
it for our
big
show this
fans of
week,
your
everyone.
we're fans of your podcast. So
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
And that's it for our show this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com. And of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Raquel. Thanks for watching.